Gentlemen, today we're chatting with George Dobbins. George has been married for 10 years. He's an owner of CrossFit Dover, and he is actually a coach for men. We will definitely dive into that a little bit. Welcome to the show, George.
Hey, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we met basically, through the interwebs, probably Facebook. We kind of run in the same circles with gyms. So tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah. So you mentioned I've been married for going on 10 years. I'm married to a beautiful lady. Her name is Brooke, and man, she's my rock at times. So she's pretty amazing. And then we've in return created a amazing little boy, and his name is Bingham. Spelled Bingham. It's funny because every time we go to the pediatrics, like, is there a Bingham? Bingham? I'm like,
No.
Man, it's Bingham, not Bingham. So anyhow, yeah, I've been in the space. I've been in the fitness space for 20 years now, and that makes me sound really old. I've been in the CrossFit space for 14 years. We celebrated 13 years during the pandemic. We are in our 14th year now at CrossFit Dover, and man, we are rocking and rolling. Yeah,
that is some serious years behind being in the fitness industry, but owning a CrossFit affiliate for that many years. That's like that's up there. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. It's as a matter of fact, CrossFit Dover is the 87th CrossFit affiliates when we're established in the year 2006.
Yeah, that's the top one of the first 100. That's a pretty serious thing. That's awesome, George. I did not know that about you, but I do know probably like 8 or 10 gym owners in that first 100. And it's a visionary breed. I don't know if I want to say breed, but it's a visionary group of people who really saw something super early on. But that's not what you're all about. I mean, you're stepping into some other things, and but owning a business for 13 years, I'm sure your mind is like, hey, what's the next thing? So how old is Bingham again?
Bingham is 8.
Okay. Yeah. So he's been probably at home instead of school the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been this past year, especially, it's been in school 2 days out the week. So he's like a Thursday, Friday, and then he's pretty much remote Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we are very much looking forward to being in school all 5 days as we go into this coming fall. But he's a stellar of a kid, and he's actually learning Chinese at this point too, which is pretty amazing. Not that we go out to eat Chinese food often, but when we do, he's able to have a conversation, and that's pretty cool to hear.
Dude,
as a parent, as a father. Yeah, that's
incredible. Do you speak Chinese?
Absolutely not. It's just it's a program within the school district that he's in. Wow. So half his day in school is in Chinese. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a unique situation. I know that language is incredibly difficult to learn. So that's impressive. But kids' brains are so malleable. They're so able to take that stuff on at their earlier ages.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I want to dive right in, because I think that we need to talk about being a dad, being a husband, being the man that we're supposed to be. And I think you and I are both super passionate about that. And so
for sure,
I don't really want to beat around the bush. I want to get right into it. A lot of times when we have a passion, you're coaching men to, I'm just assuming, be better, but let's step back. Like, why? Like I tell my story of why we started the Brotherhood of Fatherhood, and my story of, kind of not being the dad I was supposed to be, focusing too much on work. I had this origin that led me to the place where I really want to be an influence in men's lives, to be better fathers and better husbands. So tell us your story, man.
Yeah. So, man, that's actually, we can go in a couple of different directions, right? With that, as we go to answer that, the what it ends up being is, one of my character traits is to be, I'm very compassionate, right? So when it comes to being able to, see in someone's situation, and just being empathetic to that. So, the idea of being compassionate and being empathetic in situations, especially when it comes to like father and son, we can also take that even a step further back, Scott, and understand that, as a boy, there's probably certain things you aspire for, as a child. And I will tell you that there are definitely things that I've aspired for as a child, and therefore that stuck with me. I'm 38 years old, and you're talking about, from 8-year-old boy and third grade, being in third grade, and I'm 38 years old now, and man, some of those experiences just kind of stick with you. So that has really essentially, put me on the track to what I'm doing now, and that's coaching men.
All right, well, let's dive in. So what experiences, do you have any examples, or, well, I guess not examples. Do you have any stories?
Yeah. So, I will tell you that, we've, short story. Yeah. So here's a story for you. And this did not come into like my line of view until like this past year, when I was going through a, an activity, just an activity just that prompted, thoughts and emotions. And just, it took me back to when I was in the third grade. And so being in the third grade, teacher says, "Hey, class, today I want you guys to pull out a sheet of paper, and I want you to draw what it is that you want to be when you grow up." And so we're getting after it, and and then time has passed, and now teachers saying, "Hey, I need for you guys to be able to share with the class what it is that you want to be when you grow up." So you have little Johnny, who goes up in front of the class, and he's like, "Hey, I want to be a police officer," right? And then you have Emily, who comes in, and she's like, "I want to be a scientist." And I think about Johnny, I think about Emily, and I vividly remember those two people in my class, and it was my turn to go up and share what it is that I wanted to be when I grew up. And I remember, Scott, there was a little bit of an embarrassment, because I'm like, wow, I put this down on paper, and now I have to share it in front of the class. And I remember feeling a level of embarrassment, and maybe even a little bit shamed. And I turned my picture around, and I'm explaining to the class that I want to be a dad. And on my picture was a house, a father, a mother, and a little boy. And so when we talk about our experiences, and remember, I told you that I think we have a way of just maybe blocking certain things out. And, I was going through this internal activity that prompted these feelings and emotions. And this incident, this memory stood out vividly. And when that came to mind, when I was able to bring that back out, it rocked me. It rocked me, because it brought me back to being that third grade little boy. And, I asked myself, why is it that I drew a father, a mother, and a little boy, in front of this house? And why is it that I wanted to be a dad? And I look back at it, and, I have a great father. He fathered 6 of us. I'm one of 6. And with that, I will tell you, though, that as a young boy, there are certain things that I was needing, right? Yeah. So like me aspiring to be a father as a third grade little boy was me wanting a little bit more of that in my life as a young boy.
Yeah. So, but that didn't hit you, like really hit you, until last year, it sounds like.
Yeah, it wasn't until the last several months that, I was going through an activity, and the activity was like, what is, why is like your levels of why, right? It's like, you have like these 7 levels of why. Well, why is it you want to be a coach? Well, I want to be a coach because um, I want to help other men. All right. Well, so why do you want to help other men? Well, I want to help other men because I understand that there's a certain level of empowerment that we have or that we don't have as men to be able to do and handle the responsibilities that we need to be. So like, well, yeah, you want to coach because you want to help men, and you want to help men because you want them to be able to, walk into their full fulfillment. And then, well, why do you really want to coach? And after I was, yeah, I want to be able to, create a position that I'm more impactful with those that I encounter and those that have the ability and opportunity to meet and share and engage with. But then, the levels of why just kept on coming down. And I remember at the end of it, I answered this question with, I want to coach men because I remember being that little boy in the 3rd grade, knowing that there were things that I aspired, that I wanted, and being able to, in return, give men the ability to be able to connect, and was something that really drove me to, again, doing what I'm doing and walking in this purpose.
Yeah, I think
Answer question.
it did. And the reason I asked is because there's typically a reason why we're driven or called. I think it's a calling in this situation. Absolutely. To impact lives. And it's typically we did something wrong and we fixed it and figured it out, or we went through something and want other people not to have to go through it. And so you definitely Absolutely. Had that thing. What are some of the most like what are some of the most vivid visions of being raised? I mean, you said you had a great father, 6 years. Like, what kind of legacies did you learn that you get to pass down?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So Scott, I would tell you that the legacy of me being able to pass down is a certain level of work ethic. So my father is a very sacrificial man. There's, 6 kids, 5 of those kids are boys. I have one older sister, and, just to kind of give you, my father was in the military. He's Air Force, retired Air Force. He met my mother in the Philippines, where I was born. We transitioned here to the States in '91, and that's when there was an active volcano on the island, Mount Pinatubo, and that volcano erupted. We evacuated. My father stayed back. My mother brought essentially the entire family, with the assistance of the Air Force, to Dover, Delaware, and from there, it was running and gunning, man. My mother eventually took a job in New Jersey, which she spent most of her time there, and she'd come home, whether it's like once every week or once every 2 weeks, and man, those were some of the best moments in my life as a young boy, just be able to have that time with mom, and it was great. But at the same time, there was my dad that was also home, and he was very much, at the time, almost like a single parent in that manner, when my mom was away and working a job that was essentially like 2 hours out. So with that, you mentioned some legacies that were instilled, or left, or that my father has instilled is, one is the work ethic. And he was able to display that day in and day out, and which I also contribute to my ethic, my ability to be able to, from high school graduation to opening up a CrossFit gym, and for me to be able to work into that path. So the ethic is, to answer your question, is the first thing that stands out. The second thing is sacrificial. He sacrificed quite a bit for his family, and that was evident.
Yeah, that's cool. I think a lot of us grew up, not all of us, obviously. I grew up with a dad who ran a business, an incredible father. He's I feel like every year better, like we have an incredible relationship, and I see so frequently that other men don't have that. And I think that, that's a driver, but it's very common from that generation, at least. And specifically, your family coming from the Philippines, and that work ethic, that just work. And there is a cost. I had my story where my work ethic, there was a cost because I had my value ladder incorrect. I had the wrong rungs. I was stepping on the wrong rungs. I was stepping over God and my family and going right to career. And those things were left behind. And it eventually came to a place where, it imploded, and I had to make a very, very drastic decision that led me to being a long journey to being a good father. And I'm at peace with that, but man, it's a struggle in the early years. I went through that. So when you're working with men, like, what's your biggest desire? You had mentioned to me that, being driven is a very important aspect. I absolutely agree. But what is your like, if you were to say you would like to see one big change or two big changes in men, and that you would, if you helped men make a change, like, what would that area be that you're super passionate about?
Yeah. So Scott, that's a really great question. If I were to make one change with men, it's, I mentioned this earlier, is empowering, being able to give a certain level of empowerment to these men, these fathers, that's they have what it takes. They have what it takes to lead their child, their children, their families well. And although there may be some relearning and just removing some of those limiting factors, that's essentially done with instilling just new habits, and that's just creating certain disciplines, and that's developing certain routines, and but being able to, again, relearn to learn, and to essentially remove some of those limiting factors so that we're able to step into the role that we're designed for.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I think a lot of men fall into the trap of, I actually have heard this from men, and it saddens me deeply, is, well, my dad wasn't a good dad, I don't know how to do it. Yeah. And my belief is that's a bunch of BS. You can break that curse, that incorrect type of legacy. You can break that. And it sounds to me that's kind of a little bit of what you're getting at, is like, you can be an amazing father.
Absolutely. 100%. And one thing I will say is, I'll share another story with you. It was, we talk about those generational curses, right? From one generation to another. And there was a moment in my life when I was 16 years old, and I was in a youth group that was led by a lady. She goes by Lojo, who I hold very dear in my life. And nonetheless, it was a Sunday, and Lojo and I were having a conversation, and she essentially took me to my house to make sure I did one thing. And that one thing really changed my life and the relationship between my dad and myself. So Lojo takes me home, and she's like, you are going to go upstairs and wake your dad up and tell him what you need to hear. So mind you, my dad, worked overnight. He worked during the day. He had 6 kids, and with that, he was sleeping, right? So I'm like, I'm the 16-year-old little boy, and turning to be a young man, right? And I haven't heard my father tell me that he loved me. So I remember Lojo taking to my house. She was weighted downstairs, and I'm walking upstairs, and this was something I was very scared to do. I don't know why, but I was crying. I was hysterical, and I remember waking my dad up. I shook him a couple of times. He's a deep sleeper, so I'm shaking him, and he wakes up, and he wakes up in a bit of a frantic because he sees me crying and he sees me upset, and he understands that I'm in pain. And he's, what is it, George? What is it? And I just told him. I said, I need for you to tell me that you love me. I need to hear it. And he sat out the bed, and he told me, he says, I love you. And it was from my memory, that was the first time that I've heard my dad say that at 16 years old. And that in itself changed the course of like he and our relationship. And one thing he did explain to me was, essentially that's the relationship that he and his father had as well. And that I understand that, and I wasn't mad or wasn't angry for that. I didn't know, but I also knew that there was something that I needed to hear and that I was missing. And ever since then, I see my dad, and he tells me he loves me before we break. If I'm on the phone, it's I love you, Dad. I love you, George, and we hang up and we split. And that was a very pivotal point for me in my life, being that 16-year-old little boy.
That's huge. I that's breaking a generational curse. I mean, it absolutely is. And it sounds like Lojo gave you the power and the kind of the authority to be vulnerable. And I talk a lot about, vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's actually kind of a superpower. If you can step into and be vulnerable with the right people in your life, you will reach new heights in whatever it is that you're doing. So that was a major step of vulnerability. I'm sure it was scary.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah. But seriously, like, did that change your relationship with your father? Like, how did that impact you at that moment?
Man, so, there was 16, and, not knowing if I was loved. And, you can imagine what that does to a boy, just questioning, am I loved? Questioning, do I have what it takes? Questioning. And I remember after that moment, knowing that I am loved. And that is so powerful, because now when you feel that, when you know that, you feel like you can do anything. Yeah. Right. So that really opened up the ideal of, doing other things. And man, if I wanted to lift weights, if I wanted to play basketball, play soccer, if I wanted to, like, it felt like it created opportunities, knowing that, man, I am loved and I have what it takes, and I can do this.
That's awesome. That's incredible. One thing made a massive pivot in your life, and it actually probably influenced what you're doing now. I want to go back to third grade. So, you were identifying your future as being a dad, but it sounds to me like maybe that identity didn't fit within the realm of the norm at that time. Was that kind of the feeling?
Yeah. It was exposing to my classmates, and maybe to myself, that I felt incomplete. I felt like I wouldn't say broken is the word, but I just felt like I was an incomplete boy, just being there. And for me to be able to share that, just put me in a position that, man, I am sharing this and I feel incomplete. And when you feel less than, that just doesn't bring about the best feeling and emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you struggled with, like, really in the past or recently or whatever, have you struggled with your identity as a man? Like, what defines me?
Yeah. So I will tell you, just transitioning to playing sports from soccer to basketball, that's where I fell into, having that identity. Like, you would understand that, man, George, plays really good ball, right? So then it became to, leaving that and transitioning to weightlifting and then to bodybuilding. So now it was associating as George as the exercise guru, right? The bodybuilder, the weightlifter, and then from there it became, George, the gym owner. First CrossFit gym in the state of Delaware, 87th gym worldwide, and a lot of my identity fell into competing, at different levels from local to regional. And so when you ask the question of, like, identity, it certainly has transitioned through time. I will tell you, like, I do feel as if my identity as son, and that's son of the Most High, that's son of God, right? I am, and that's also father. That is also, and before that, that's actually husband, right? Husband and father. So that's where I've essentially found my identity in, and I'll tell you, there was a big struggle in that too. And it wasn't until, Bingham, who's 8, and me wanting to essentially change some of those generational curses that I fell into, my identity as father, and I really have taken a hold of that. And I don't plan on letting go. So
That's awesome. I had a guest, probably 11, 12 months ago. His name's Rick Loy. He's a wise man that I know. And he came on and he was talking about identity. He identified, and I've identified that men really struggle with identity. We place our identity, like you said, in our sports, in our performance, in our role, in our work, or in our business, or whatever it is. And this is a major thing I fell into. I was Scott, the bike shop owner, and then I was Scott, the gym owner, and then I was Scott, this guy. And when those were taken away from me, or when I stepped away from those, actually, like, I was lost. I didn't have an identity. And he nailed it. He goes, when you transition from who you are to whose you are, you really have an overall peace. And that's been an ongoing theme as I interview men of faith, some of them not so strongly in their faith, but it's a very strong tie with men who have really embraced that their identity doesn't have anything to do with what they do and their performance. It has to do with so much more than that. So that's incredible. And I think I would venture to say that a good 80% of men right now struggle with identity.
Yeah, 100%. And, I will tell you, the thought of, when we think of identity, we think of, all right, well, like, what is it that I do from, like, a day to day? So, like, you might associate, like, your identity as, a student, or you might associate your identity as an athlete, or you might associate your identity as a business owner. But it wasn't until I really understood, what is it that I stand for, and what is it that I want to embrace and see flourish, and what is it that until I was able to really get some clarity on exactly what really holds deep and dear to me, it wasn't until then in which I can really formulate what that identity is, and what my identity is. And so I can understand the struggle there. I can really understand the struggle. You mentioned like 80%, and I do agree that, yeah, you're right. It's probably about 80% of men who do struggle with that. And I will tell you that, with that, there's opportunity to eliminate that and fall into to an identity that's worth living, right? And that's something that I enjoy helping men do as well, is getting clarity in doing that.
Yeah.
And man, it's been really good. It's been
Tell
really
you,
good.
if you can help men understand identity, getting clear on that, like the acceleration of their relationships, of their own personal success, of their ability to handle tough things increases tenfold immediately. As soon as you are okay with who you are and understand who and why and how, everything else, I can't even explain the freedom. I mean, it's something I'm so passionate about, because it took me years. I'm 40, almost 48. And it took me a lot of years to figure this out. And it was pain, and it was angst, and it was frustration, and it was searching, and it was painful. And man, if you can help men get through that faster, or not go through it nearly as much, there's no dollar amount you can put. I would challenge any man that's listening. There is no dollar amount you can place on getting help in that area. No dollar amount. Even if you say you can't afford it, the question should now become, how can I afford it? Because it is so incredibly powerful, and you will step into who you really are meant to be.
Absolutely.
When you get your identity in place.
Definitely. 100%. And the thing is, Scott, is, we look and we think identity, and I believe a lot of times we look and search in the wrong places, right? The ability to be able to understand what that is, there's experiences that we each face, whether they're traumatic experiences, good or bad. And then in essence, we also have, we're given these opportunities to be able to maybe even touch on some of those experiences. And I believe that a lot of times we just search for identity in the wrong places. And, and at the same time, you can't mistaken labeling as identity as well, right? Just because, if we're talking about labels in which someone has put on you, or even you have put on yourself, and then you turn those labels into like your identity, that is, I believe, the biggest issue and the problem that men have when it comes to identifying who it is they are, or who it is that they even want to become, right? Yeah. And it's definitely a period of just gaining and gathering clarity, right?
I think a lot of you said it so eloquently, taking the label. So I'll use myself, Scott, the bike shop owner. When I decided to close that bike shop, I was like, Scott, lost, like completely lost, because I was so ingrained in everyone calling me the bike shop owner. So now I'm a father and a husband and a man who owns a business. I am not a business owner. And there's so much pride you take in, like, I have a business and it pays my bills and it's awesome. Well, it's a label. It's not a definition. I think that switch right there, helping people make that switch right there, is huge. Like, I want to get into mountain biking again. And I'm like, I don't want to be a mountain biker. You just like blew my mind, because you actually like solidified something I've been trying to work through. It's like, I don't want to be a mountain biker. Well, I can enjoy mountain biking and just be me. Right?
100%. Absolutely.
And I bet I'll enjoy it 100 times more, because I'm not now the mountain biker. I'm just Scott, who's going to go on a mountain bike ride.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And now that you talk about that, Scott, the ideal of now that it's not Scott who owns it's not Scott the business owner, and now your peers and those that perceive you, it's there's a certain level of expectation and some of that external pressures that we receive from those that are around us, whether our peers or our colleagues, that also can influence identity. And again, when you allow that to happen, it doesn't leave a identity that's fulfilled, because again, it's externally driven from peers, colleagues, expectations, and what society and the world thinks you should be, as opposed to what it is that God has put in your life, the experiences, again, whether they're good or the bad opportunities He's opened up, and it's now no longer taking those and forming and creating the identity that, or who it is that you want to be, right?
Yeah. That's the thing. If you have an identity in something that someone's labeled you as, or you're doing, that can be stripped away. Like
100%.
that is totally that is totally able to be taken from you. If you are paralyzed, you can no longer be that. But if you're paralyzed and you have an identity in higher level things and bigger things and a purpose driven thing, you cannot strip away that identity, and it will not ruffle your feathers. Now, here's a warning I want to give men, because I went through 2 years in extreme darkness, personal darkness. When I decided to stop being Scott the cyclist, Scott the bike shop owner, that identity that I thought I would still be the cyclist, I still thought I'd be the guy everyone wanted to ride with, went away overnight, gone. And I was not prepared for that. So the whole story is, like, if I were to do that again, I would want a mentor or a coach in my corner, because just taking a step away and learning and changing your focus on really, or your understanding of your identity, is amazing, but it will absolutely 100% ruffle feathers of other people, because you personally will change. And when you change, I'm not talking about bad change. This is really good change. This is next level success change. When you figure this out, I 100%, if you can figure this out, you will step into a new level of whatever it is that you're pursuing. I can guarantee it. I've seen it over and over again. But you need someone there, because the people who are comfortable with you being you, the so-and-so, are all of a sudden going to feel threatened. And there may be a disconnect where you don't enjoy them anymore, or they just completely forget about you, not because you've changed, but because you've realized what you really are. This is a big warning. Have a man in your corner to walk you through that understands it. Someone who will not disappear because you have gone through this transformation, that you are ready to take on the next level of being a man, being a leader of your family, being a leader in your community, being a leader in business, whatever it is. It will change. Your friendships will change, but it will be so much better.
Yeah. And, Scott, you hit it right on the dot. You mentioned, being able to pick up a mentor or a coach. And, it's also one of those maybe stigmas, but coaches need coaches too. Right. And, like me being a coach, you think about it, I've operated the gym. I'm in my 14th year, and I'm making this transition, this pivot into an element that I am unfamiliar with when it comes to essentially remote coaching. Now, the content behind the coaching, I'm very much familiar with. I have a very high level of power and certainty when it comes to that. But the idea of putting it out into space and getting it to move is certainly not in my element, right? So that's different. And you mentioned, being able, when you make that change, having a mentor, having a coach, it's huge, right? And for me, I tell you, I love my gym. CrossFit Dover is an amazing affiliate. I have some of the best members, and I serve on a coaching team that is top notch, right? Me going into a realm and pivoting into a different direction, Scott, can also, bring up some of those questions or concerns. Well, what's George doing? Well, George, for the last 14 years, George has been George Dobbins, the CrossFit gym owner. And so now when you see, whether it's on social media or you hear through the grapevine that George is, filing suit and maybe a slightly different direction, it does creates, just some questions and, maybe even like some concerns and, therefore being able, when we make that step, when we create that transition, I am agreeing with you that being able to do that in conjunction, locking arms with somebody else, a mentor, a coach, is vital. It's important, because essentially it can steer the ship in a direction that isn't where it wasn't supposed to be heading.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like, I don't even think the podcast where I said this has been released yet, but I did a solo podcast, I've done a few in a row. And I was talking about hiring a coach. I think I've been on so many podcasts lately, but which is a good problem. But I was making the reference. If you want to hire a coach, coaches are good. You should have a coach in your life. I don't believe there should ever be a time in my life from now on that I am not paying someone good money to help me steer my ship, because I think it's just so incredibly imperative. But the first question I told the audience to ask their coach, do you have a coach? And you never hire someone who doesn't have a coach. And that's something I believe so firmly in, because everyone has their thing. Everyone needs their help. And the value, you will realize that the value is there if who you're hiring has hired someone else. And almost exclusively, I can tell you, they're hiring someone that costs a lot more than their service. And I know that's true for me. And I imagine it's true for you.
Absolutely.
And I it's like one of the very first questions. If you're looking for a coach, who's your coach? Like, what are they coaching? Like, are you being coached? What impact has that had on your life? Because it is a difference maker between a coach and a wannabe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I absolutely agree. It's been, for me, being able to, there's certain things that we are good at, and then there's certain things that we're not so good at. And, one thing that I am getting better at is communication. And again, we talk about childhood, we talk about experience, we talk about how we're raised and brought up, and if there's a lack of communication that is happening there, it's very easy for that to be able to spew into other aspects and areas of your life. And as a coach who's also being coached, being able to, I've understood, being a student, I've understood as being coached that the amount of communication that has to be present with a mentor, with a coach is highly valuable time. It's and I tell you, you mentioned like it can open wonders, and I honestly didn't know that I would be, in a position of working with fathers, with men, with fathers. I saw myself as, opening up a gym and retiring as a gym owner. And so it's definitely, it's life-changing.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that you probably had some of those same experiences where you haven't closed your gym, you haven't sold it, but you still, even because you're doing something else, that makes people uncomfortable. I mean, That's the George I know, what's going on. And there's a feeling of betrayal, because we're human. stupid that way, but you're not betraying anybody. You're just stepping into a even more impactful role. In my opinion, you're stepping up your level, which will also steer people away from you because they don't like others elevating themselves above them. So by hiring a coach, you're automatically surrounding yourself with someone who's elevated, because they're helping you through the things that you need to help. And they probably already achieved it, or at least I think they should. They've already achieved what you're trying to do. And so you're elevating. That makes people within your own circle a little uncomfortable. And I think it's the story of the buffalo or the bison. I tell all the time. Bison, if a storm is coming up over the mountains, they run right through it. They charge towards it, and they go until they're on the other side of it, because they know that they're going to get pelted, and they're going to be beat, but it will be much shorter and they'll get through it. And then there's the cattle who walk the direction of the storm that is going, and they're in it for so long and they just get stuck in the storm. We want to be bison. And part of that, or buffalo, I like the word buffalo better. Part of that is the fact that by improving ourselves, stepping into a higher understanding of who we are, by hiring a coach, you are running into the storm. There is going to be stuff that hits you. Undoubtedly, you're going to be socked in the face with hail. You're going to get horrible things happening to you. You're going to go through a lot of emotional things, but the other side is beautiful. And hey, I'm here to tell you, there's another storm brewing every moment that you get through. So learn to embrace the challenge. That's what I love.
I love it. And I love that you're able to share that as well, because it does create it's inspiring, but it does create a level of drive that I believe, is essentially like why I coach, the idea of like iron sharpens iron, that's it, like you mentioned, the ability to be able to weather the storm. And, just hearing that from you is certainly encouraging. So yeah, I appreciate that 100%.
Yeah. I think we just need to scream it for the mountaintops. I mean, honestly, it's going to take men like you going out there on a limb and saying, I'm here to help. I have something that you need. And then men to be vulnerable, because we talked about vulnerability. As soon as you step into vulnerability, new things in your life are going to appear. You are going to reach new levels. You heard it from your dad's lips. I love you, son. You heard it. And you stepped in that vulnerability, and then you went to the next level in life. And you probably at that moment stepped more into a little bit of who you were. And so, it's going to take guys like you to change the landscape of fatherhood. It's going to take guys like you to change the landscape of marriage in our society. And I'm back there just pushing on your back, pushing you forward, whether you like it or not. I want to ask you this. Yeah, I want to ask you this: the role. What do you feel the role of being an incredible husband, the role as a husband, how does that play in your role as a father?
The role as husband, I would say helper. It's not uncommon for me to say to my wife, Brooke, is what can I help you with today? And being able to vocalize that to her, knowing that she understands that I am here to help. It's for us, it's a partnership. We have the opportunity to come together in unity to do that. We're one. And just because we're one, I do believe that there's areas in which if I can help, that I will. So to answer your question, it's helper, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When your son is your age and he comes up to you and says, Dad, actually he doesn't, let's rephrase this. you see him interacting with his wife and his kids, what is that thing that you see that just makes your heart like leap with joy, and you know that you've passed something on that is a legacy?
Man, that is so good, Scott. What I see when you ask that question, what I see is Bingham as my age being able to father and be present for his little guy or his little guys, however that ends up being. And that's engaged. That's from the hand on the head to the hand around the neck. That's the hand on the back, and that's the laughter, the looking up to Father and just smiles. That is the consoling, the if I'm hurting, Bingham to be able to console, protect. And I think if you were to just really summarize all of that and what that ends up looking like, it's you have to be present, you have to be there, and you have to be available. And it's not just being there in the physical, but it's also being there and engaged. And I'll tell you this, right now, Bingham and I are in a really a interesting position in our lives right now where he loves Pokemon Go. And he loves it so much that, we go on these Pokemon Go walks. And it was me walking with him as he was catching these Pokemon. And it wasn't until, Scott, I'm like, man, you know what? I'm walking with him as he's catching these Pokemon, but I want him to know that I am right there with him. I am on the level that he is on. So several weeks ago, I went ahead and I downloaded a Pokemon app on my phone, and now I have my own Pokemon Go account, and now we're catching Pokemon together. And the ability for us to be able to, not just me being there in the physical, but now you have me being there in the physical and then the connection. And that's what I see when I see Bingham at my age, at 38, being able to father and parent.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Presence, being present, being in the moment, and 100% present is a massive message that I want to get across, because I was not good at that. And I'm telling you, I still work on it as a driven individual. I still work on it. And I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and all they want is, when they are there, they want attention, and they want to know that I'm there for them. I'm listening to them. And I think it's one of the biggest struggles men have. And I think that's beautiful. And the only way, let me rephrase that. The most impactful way we can ensure that is by doing it ourselves, that we can ensure our we're raising future adults. One of the things that we believe, that the future adults that we raised are doing the things that we hold high in regard. And we have to model it. We have to do it. That gives them so much better chance. So I love that. I can honor and support you all day long on that one. Man, I've really enjoyed hearing your stories. These are really great, George. Thank you for being honest and open with us. And thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, it's been quite an honor. You reached out, and it was one of those deals where, it also takes a certain level of vulnerability, and I also know that it's not all about me. And when you have the opportunity to share, and when you're quick to think as well, how will I feel? I also believe that is the opposition that you face, that we want to essentially overcome, because you asking for me to come on to the show is, it's like, well, it puts me in a vulnerable state, and but also understanding that it's not about me,
right.
And it's about those who can listen, and those who can take what is being heard and be moved by it, and be moved so much that they take action. And if that is able to happen due to this conversation, then by all means, it's doing what's supposed to be doing. So I absolutely appreciate the opportunity. I am honored to be able to take this time, and thank you so much for your heart for brotherhood, your heart for fatherhood, your heart for just being able to create a platform and opportunity for folks to come on and for folks to view in and listen. It's certainly a calling, and I wish you the absolute best as you move forward with this, Scott.
I think you're going to be along on the journey with me. I'm good with that. Before we go, last thing I want you to say is, I want you to tell us, like, I would, if guys, I don't do this often. In fact, I don't know that I've ever done it, but if you're feeling a tugging, like these are some things you need to work on, you got to step past like thinking about anything and just reach out to George. I'm just endorsing it straight up. I get nothing out of this. I'm just endorsing it straight up. What I get out of it is a continued movement towards my mission. And so, George, how can someone get a hold of you if they feel like, wow, I gotta work on this stuff?
Yeah. So on Facebook, at George Dobbins Coaching. On Instagram, it's ownyourday_coaching. At the same time, there's always email, handy dandy email. I think we forget about at times, and it's george@georgedobbins.net. And I don't think there's between one of those three, Scott,
we'll get there.
Find me.
Yeah. And we'll throw it in the show notes. So guys, if you didn't catch that, you can jump on the show notes. You can shoot me a message and ask me, hey, I want to be connected with George. I'm sure George is willing to chat with you with zero pressure to kind of give you an idea. I don't know what his process is, but I'm sure he's got one. Reach out to him. Again, guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode. Have an amazing day.
Thank you for listening to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and follow us on social media. If you are a father, make sure you join our Facebook group, the Brotherhood of Fatherhood. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more podcasts from the Brotherhood of Fatherhood.